Good morning, everyone. Wayne Motts, the President Emeritus and historian at the Gettysburg Foundation, in my Walking Wednesday close again and again with my friend and special guest, Jim Hessler, licensed battlefield guide, Gettysburg Battle Gettysburg podcast, author extraordinaire, historian. And Jim, once again, we really appreciate you coming out and being with us for round 3 of Pickett's charge, and now we've got the Union defense. You know, there's a great thing that we've heard it many times that George Pickett says when he was asked why did the Confederate Army lose July 3rd, and he said the Yankees had something to do with it. And almost always we overlook that.
Yes, we do.
So we're here again today, and I think this is going to be a great segment for Walking Wednesday. If you haven't been on the YouTube channel to check part 1, which is the advance of Pickett's division, and part 2, which is Pettigrew and Trimble's division advance, the northern wing, please make sure you visit that, look at that, and now we're over here for part 3. And what I'd like to do, I think, Jim, we'll start out, we'll go back and forth on some of this, but let's show everybody where we're at. We're in the side yard of the widow Leister, Lydia Leister. You'll see Cemetery Ridge, and you will see the statue to General George Gordon Meade. We'll come across here, go to the barn. That's right here behind us, the original barn that was here during the time of the battle. And Abby, if you want to swing around, we can get the corner of the widow Leister's home here. Mrs. Leister was a widow. James Leister, her husband, died in 1859, and she purchased this home. Sorry, Jim. She purchased this.
Walking, folks.
She purchased this home in 1861. She lived here with her 6 children, and like many of the Gettysburg civilians, she decided to flee on July 1st, 1863, and get out of here. So when George Gordon Meade arrives here after midnight, July 1st and 2nd, he will set this up as his headquarters, and he will use it throughout the battle with a temporary interruption during the cannonade when he has to flee this place for July 3rd. But this is definitely, it's been called the nerve center of the Army of the Potomac for Gettysburg, and it certainly is. And Jim, he spends the night here on July 1. I mean, if you can say he got any sleep. I just read a letter where he said he didn't change his clothes for like 9 or 10 days. He hasn't had any sleep. You know, when you think about what he's going through, it's tremendous. Why don't you give us a little recap on day 2 and then talk a little bit about the council war that we have here for that.
Sure. So hi again, everybody, and thanks, Wayne, thanks, Abby, thanks to the Gettysburg Foundation for having me again. So we won't do a lot of detailed recap on July 2nd, folks. You should go back and watch the prior videos where we set a lot of that up. Suffice to say, from the Army of the Potomac's perspective, the Union line, Cemetery Hill, Cemetery Ridge, Culp's Hill, Little Round Top, what we refer to today as the Fish Hook, as battered but unbroken on the night of July 2nd. Lee's attempts to drive in the left flank of the Army of the Potomac have failed. Of course, there has been fighting after dark over on Culp's Hill on the Union right, and that will pick up again in the early morning hours of July 3rd, not far from where we're standing right now. But let's talk about the Council of War. So General Meade, late evening of July 2nd, convenes what we often refer to as this War Council of all of his corps commanders, acting corps commanders, some of the staff, such as General Warren, the chief engineer. Abby, why don't we pan over here while we're talking about it, towards the Leister house. So they convene this War Council in the Leister farmhouse, which is behind us right now. You know, typically this meeting has often been remembered as sort of Meade trying to get the vote, the consensus of his subordinates in terms of whether we should stay and fight it out or whether we should depart Gettysburg. It should be noted that about 8:00 p.m. that evening, Meade had apparently written a missive to Halleck down in Washington, basically saying to the effect that I am going to stay here tomorrow, but I cannot determine whether my operations will be offensive or defensive until I check on the condition of the Army. So I think that's really what he's doing here. I think he's already decided he's going to stay, but he's got to check on the condition of the Army. And if you remember, Wayne, when Joe Hooker was in command, one of the things 5th Corps Commander George Meade often complained about was the idea that Hooker didn't share with subordinates and kept the subordinates in the dark. So I think that's what's going on here that evening. They talk, they vote. Basically, as Henry Slocum famously said, we're going to stay and fight it out. And that leaves the Army of the Potomac committed to remaining here when the action begins or continues on the morning of July 3rd. And I'll pause there if you had anything to add.
No, I think that's great, and I think you described it very well, Jim. And I concur with you. I think a lot of this is decided, and when Meade gets here, but to me, he wants to inform the subordinates. And he's got some well-respected people that are in here. Certainly John Newton being high on the list as an engineer. Everybody perks up. Hey, what's John Newton think about this? He's got some opinions in here that I'm sure that he'd like to hear, but it appears that he's already made this choice. Now, one of the things that I'd like to ask you about, so we know there's, I think John Gibbon mentions there's about a dozen people in this small house. There's only 2 rooms. In this house, the cigar smoke must have been, tremendously thick for anybody to see anything inside.
Hey, you mentioned the guy hasn't changed his clothes in days, folks. It's probably a little smelly in there too.
This is probably not a place that you want to be. But there's a comment that's mentioned, and we should tell the viewers, I think, and they may know, most of the recollections we have from this gathering, from this council war, actually come from a post-recollection published after John Gibbon's death, long after John Gibbon's death there. So John Gibbon is really one of the primary sources here. Gibbon claims that after this council war, he and Meade are talking outside, and Meade makes a comment that if Lee attacks tomorrow, it will be in your front. And some people think, well, did he talk about that because this was written afterwards and he supports Meade? Did this really occur? What is happening there? But that probably happened right out here where we're standing, or pretty close to where we're standing. What, Jim, how do you feel about that? What's sort of your opinion on that?
So when Gibbon says, well, General Meade, why do you feel that way? Meade supposedly says, well, they've tried my flanks and failed, and now they're going to go for the center. I've gone back and forth on that over the years. Is it apocryphal or did it actually happen? I guess I tend to think, yes, he probably did have that conversation with Gibbon. John Gibbon, we should point out, normally a division commander in the 2nd Corps. There's some debate, or dare I even say confusion, over whether Hancock is commanding the 2nd Corps or Hancock has kind of a broader command of the left center. That'll play out later on July 3rd.
Sure will.
But that's why Gibbon is at the meeting. And so in any event, I probably think it happened. Although having said that, I think there is adequate testimony both from George Meade and from the accounts of others such as Frank Haskell that indicate Meade was also worried about strengthening his left. And, as we get into the morning activities of July 3rd, we're going to put a couple of brigades of the 6th Corps behind the Round Tops to strengthen that left. So while I think, Wayne, in my opinion, he very well may have had that conversation with Gibbon, I do think it's not quite as simple as that. And I do think Meade is concerned particularly about the left, which he is going to take action to do something about. That's my take.
And that makes perfect sense. On the morning of July 3rd, there's a lot of activity, of course, around this headquarters. We're going to talk more about what Meade does for the Union defense. But I think for the viewers, Jim, my suggestion to them while we're speaking is to think a couple things. First thing I think that they ought to think about when it comes to this Union defense is the artillery. The artillery for the Union Army here on July 3rd in response to Pickett's charge or the cannonade or the artillery that Lee wants to bring to bear against this line. Henry Jackson Hunt, the artillerist in charge of the artillery here for the Army of the Potomac, just a superior plan, superior operations, superior number of guns. You've got the Artillery Reserve, which sits on the George Spangler Farm, which is owned by the Gettysburg Foundation. Hunt brings up more artillery and can commit it just about anywhere he wants. So we're going to go over most of this, but I want the viewers, I think, to think a lot about the artillery because, in my view, that's going to separate a lot between the Confederate defeat here and the Union victory. Also, we can think about the amount of infantry brought up to bear here. We know that Meade plans to have support of this line, and brings troops together from the 1st Corps, which are some of them are already here. Some 3rd Corps units are brought over here. Shaler's Brigade is detailed by him to do that. So there's a number of different infantry units that are also supposed to support this. Robinson's division is coming in to support. Of course, they're right behind where Ziegler's Grove is. So there are thousands of Union troops available or right there to meet this response.
It's a great point, Wayne. And again, that's the strength of the fishhook in the interior lines.
Right.
You know, I always say on tours and such, nobody during the battle says rally around the fishhook. And I don't even know at what point the fishhook as a term becomes a thing. But the idea of the interior lines, that you can get these guys to different points on the field so quickly. And again, that's well represented here at the Leicester headquarters. Tawnytown Road, Baltimore Pike, Culp's Hill, almost everything is within shouting distance of us at this point, or at least it feels that way.
Right, you're right. I mean, obviously the interior lines of communication and support are going to play a big role here. Now we're going to move from here, everybody, and we're going to go down to the Union left center, and we're going to start there and then start our walkway up. Jim, is there anything you want to talk about here for the morning, or anything you'd like to discuss before we move on?
You know, it might be worth just adding to people the rooster lunch that occurs around noon. Kind of. Why don't we pan back over to the fields here south of the Leicester farmhouse? So as Wayne indicated, a lot of planning, a lot of troop movements going on the morning of July 3rd. Of course, fighting was going on for up to 7 hours over at Culp's Hill on the right. So it is not quiet here by any stretch of the imagination. But around 12 o'clock noon, Hancock, Gibbon, Frank Haskell, a number of people associated with the 2nd Corps have a lunch of acquired rooster. I think it's rooster, not chicken, but anyways, folks, some kind of poultry in the fields here south of the Leicester farmhouse. You know, when you're commander of the Army of the Potomac, you join the lunch, you get a cracker box to sit on. That's one of the job perks, folks. And it's a hot day, it's a hot morning, it's getting hotter as we move into the afternoon. They're having their lunch. Meade then, after eating, will basically depart to examine the lines. And I believe there's some indication he may go as far as Little Round Top that morning to kind of observe what's going on. Hancock, the rest of the boys are kind of lounging around, dozing a little bit, when shortly after 1 o'clock, boom! The Confederate artillery from the cannonade starts. And Wayne panned over before to Cemetery Ridge. Of course, many of the Confederate overshots will start coming into these fields and landing here at the Leicester house. So you can imagine the chaos and everything that would have been going on that afternoon as Confederate artillery projectiles were falling in here and for a while disrupted the Union Army's headquarters, as Meade will have to leave and go over to Powers Hill.
And he's urged to get out of here. There's a great story about one of the reporters that's here in the yard. All the reporters are hunkered down in the yard, and all this artillery's coming in, and the chief of staff is wounded. There's horses killed everywhere. And apparently Meade comes out of the house, comes onto this porch, which is right over here off to the left of the view, everybody, and says something to the effect that, oh, this isn't as bad as Mexico, and shuts the door and goes back in there. They did finally, the people around me finally did get the commanding general to get out of here and move over to Powers Hill, and then he'll come back here. But it also makes you wonder whether that rooster, Jim, was part of what was taken here from Mrs. Leicester. She complains a lot of things are taken out of this. She really doesn't get recompense for this. Her yard is wrecked. She's got to dig a new well. She's got dead horses everywhere in the yard.
I think are damaged.
All her trees are damaged. And it's difficult for her to make a living as a widow as it is with these children. The youngest child, when James Leicester died in 1861, I think or 59, when he died in 1859, the youngest child, I believe, was about 3 years old. So that child is just an elementary school child at the time. So Mrs. Leicester has younger children here, and they've got to be taken care of. Eventually, this house is sold to the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association, goes into the National Park Service. It's one of the early houses purchased here. And saved. So from the side yard of General Meade's headquarters here for July 3rd, 1863, walking Wednesday, Union defense, and we're going to pick it up on the Union left center.
All right,
everyone, we're here along the left center of the Union line for July 3rd, 1863. We're on the artillery line for July 3rd, which will be under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Freeman McGilvery. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Jim, maybe we ought to show everybody where we're at.
Sure.
Would you like to have Abby do some panning? Or
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Abby, would you like to pan? So, folks, as Wayne said, we're basically along McGilvery's artillery line. But if you look behind us, you will pan towards what is essentially the Emmitsburg Road ridge line. And we will move basically from camera left or my right and kind of swing in that direction. Wayne, I can see the Longstreet Tower this morning.
Yes, you can.
And right below that, of course, would be Joseph Sherfy's Peach Orchard. Now, on the morning and afternoon of July 3rd, the area of the Peach Orchard and the Emmitsburg Road are heavily occupied by Confederate artillery.
Right.
Edward Porter Alexander from Longstreet's 1st Corps. So imagine, folks, Confederate artillery also along that ridge line. I can see the red Sherfy barn, which, of course, by July 3rd is set on fire, unfortunately, to some tragic results to wounded Union soldiers who are in the barn. I think what will be of note, though, to us is directly behind me, you will see the white Klingel house and the Klingel barn next to it. And I say that's of note because if you think about where we set up Pickett's charge in the first video, Kemper's brigade of Pickett's division, in essence, crosses the Emmitsburg Road about where the Klingel property is. So, folks, we'll kind of envision and maybe even talk about Kemper's guys coming through the field and how they might have exposed themselves to some of the artillery along this line. Okay, what else can we see? So we got Klingel. I'm going to switch over here. And what do you know, folks? The car on the road is just passing by the Virginia State Memorial, which is nestled in the tree line back there. Again, as we said in prior videos, that general area is where the left of Pickett's division is stepping off and eventually the right of Pettigrew and Trimble's line as well. And I think last but not least, I'll pause with the Kadori property, the big red barn with the 3 white steeples. All of this field, again, would have been covered by Confederate infantry as they got across the Emmitsburg Road and getting hit by McGilvery's artillery line, which is what we're here at this stop to talk to you about.
So, Jim, I think for the viewers, we talked once again that artillery is such an integral part here of July 3rd, both for the Confederate and the Union. And keep in mind how much Lee wanted the artillery to do. And we talked about that in the previous videos. Certainly, this artillery is going to play a very important role here for July 3rd. And where we're at, we're south of where the main defensive line for the Union infantry is located here. And it's going to be shored up by a lot of these guns under Lieutenant Colonel Freeman McGilvery's command. We know a lot about McGilvery. McGilvery is 40 years old here in the Battle of Gettysburg. He's born in 1823. He is a Maine native. And apparently, before the American Civil War, he really liked the sea. He was a sea captain. He spent a lot of time out at the sea. And when the Civil War breaks out, he is overseas. And he finds out the Civil War has broken out. He comes back to Maine. He volunteers his services, and he becomes an artillerist in the 6th Maine Artillery. And he will stay in that branch of artillery, promoted successively from there. And here at Gettysburg, he'll be in charge of this, really the artillery reserve area that's going to be over here where we're at. And he's going to bring a lot of guns to bear, a lot of batteries here, Jim. We talked about the Confederates having some 150-some guns in action. The Union Army probably has 90 to 100 of guns, depending on what number we want to count over at this end of the line. Here, and McGilvery will be the guy shoring up this entire defense. So we've got a lot of batteries here, which go all the way from like Little Round Top through where we're at, right?
Yeah. And, we should maybe point out, too, that McGilvery's role here transitions from the role he played late on July 2nd. Because when Sickles' line was collapsing behind us, it was McGilvery is one of the unsung heroes of the second day who put this patched up artillery line together. So between the night of July 2nd into the morning of July 3rd, McGilvery is, bringing guns in, bringing them out, kind of getting batteries back together. On McGilvery's part of the line, Wayne, you talked about numbers. McGilvery said in his report that during the course of the third day, he commanded about 39 guns.
39.
Wow. Now, again, folks, they're not all here at one time. Guys are getting moved around or that, but again, about 39. along here is what he said.
And this Union artillery defensive line goes from the top of Little Round Top, basically, all the way over to up past, you've got guns up at the cemetery. You got 30-some guns under Osborne in the cemetery. You got a tremendous amount of artillery that goes all across here, which is going to be one of the factors that's going to defeat the Confederates here on July 3rd, 1863. So, McGilvery has got an interesting post-Gettysburg history. Unfortunately for him, in August of 1864, he is outside Petersburg. He's a full colonel in the artillery, and he sustains a wound at the Battle of Deep Bottom in August of 1864 in one of his fingers. And this appears to be a very minor wound. But this wound gets infected, and they have to do an amputation on this wound. And unfortunately for McGilvery, he has some sort of reaction or dies under anesthetic, dies under the effects of basically chloroform in September of 1864. And his body's transported. He's buried back in Maine. But one of the very few, from what I understand, people that die because of the administration of chloroform in the Civil War, Jim.
Yeah, it's a tragic end to, as we said, a great unsung Gettysburg hero. Had he lived, had he come back here for reunions or maybe written books or stuff like that, maybe more people would know about him.
So much we don't know. From this. So from the artillery barrage, which will start basically at 1 o'clock on July 3rd. Remember, the Confederates want to bombard, and barrage and bombardment, we got a couple different words, we know that. There's a bombardment of this Union line with the intent to soften it up, to destroy morale, to kill Union soldiers, to take out Union artillery. Of course, we've got a very active Union artillery reserve that Henry Hunt is able to bring up. But this line that you see right here behind Jim and I, going to be heavily engaged in that bombardment cannonade on July 3rd, 1863 here. And we've got competition between the infantry commanders, if that's the right word, and the artillery commanders. Jim, you want to mention a little bit about that? Or
swing into that? Yeah, sure. Winfield Hancock, folks. I know we have a lot of Hancock fans watching in the audience today. So, as we talk about the planning and the coordination, look, these are real people, and that does not mean Army of the Potomac planning is flawless on July 3rd or on any day, because, they're real people and there's confusion and lack of communication and all that good stuff. So as Wayne indicated, McGilvery is basically part of the artillery reserve. Henry Hunt, commander of the artillery for the Army of the Potomac, actually does spend a portion of the cannonade here with McGilvery, supervising guns and watching the effect of the cannonade, which they said on this part of the field was primarily ineffective, that most of the Confederate shots were going overhead into the field behind the camera here. But as you start to get up around the Pennsylvania Monument and just a little bit past the Pennsylvania Monument, you start to get into the zone of Winfield Hancock commanding the 2nd Corps. Now, at the first stop, we kind of alluded to this idea that, there's a little bit of uncertainty over whether Hancock is just commanding the 2nd Corps or whether he has defense of the entire, what we'll call the left center of the Union line. Hancock certainly thought he was entrusted with this entire part of the field. And so as Hunt, McGilvery, trained artillerists are basically telling their batteries to stop firing, withhold their fire because they want to conserve ammunition for later on. Over on the 2nd Corps side of the field, you got Hancock basically telling Hazard's brigade, 2nd Corps, to basically fire vigorously and respond for the morale impact and all the other things that would go along with that. So you've got Hancock kind of riding around telling guns to fire. You've got Hunt and then McGilvery basically telling the artillery to not fire. And this obviously created a little bit of friction between Hancock and Hunt that colorfully continued into the post-war years as the two guys were kind of saying, look, Hancock's saying, look, I was entrusted with that part of the field, not some staff officer, which is kind of how he referred to Hunt. And meanwhile, Hunt was saying, well, guys like Hunt and other artillery commanders were essentially saying, well, this shows you how little an infantry guy knows about artillery. So the two branches of service, not quite in simpatico on how they should be managing this part of the line.
Yeah, and usually in the Civil War, the artillery is subordinate to the infantry.
Right,
We also should say, unfortunately for Hunt, as the Brigadier General and Chief of Artillery for the Army of Potomac, he only has 1 star.
Yeah.
Hancock has got 2.
Yep.
That's another problem.
Yep.
But Hancock rides down and tells some of these men to fire, and right, Jim, and they refuse. They just they said, no, forget about it. We're not paying any attention to it.
And I love it. We think of Hancock as this big star in the Army.
Yeah.
Some of these artillery guys are just like, oh, some infantry officer came by. And a lot of times when Hancock would leave, they would say, okay, stop firing.
Yeah, and you've got 2 different points of view here, and both of these points of view have some validity. We don't want to discount either of them. From Hancock's point of view, he understands that morale for that Union defense is important, and I think he wants to see that his troops be buoyed by the fact that they're firing back at the Confederates when they're taking a huge pounding in the middle of this line. From Hunt's standpoint, these aren't certain targets. They're not targets that you want to waste a lot of ammunition on and start doing that. I know in one of the videos I did somewhere, somebody asked about, are they shooting artillery in defenses or doing things like that? This is not what the Chief of Artillery, this ammunition is stuff that you want to make sure every shot counts, just like you want to do with a rifle. And even though the Union Army has more ammunition than the Confederates, considerably more, I think, shooting at fences or not certain targets are wasted, at least in Hunt's mind and the mind of the artillerists that are here for July 3rd. So it's infantry and artillery targets, when they can find them, that they're going to be looking at. And we've got a big smoke-covered battlefield, which on a nice, beautiful day when we're out here, on a day that you tour the battlefield, you don't see this as a day like soldiers would have seen it. And today you've got smokeless gunpowder. In the Civil War, you don't have that. A Civil War battlefield looks very, very different than anything we're going around and looking like today or on a modern battlefield. And you have to keep those things in mind when you're thinking about why there's certain mentality for people doing certain things.
Yeah, and like you said, there's sort of 2 different thoughts on this. Major General Hancock considers all of this under his command. And Hancock said later, if we had lost this part of the field, you wouldn't have blamed Hunt, you would have blamed me. And because of that, Hancock thinks he's got control of this part of the line. Hunt, for his part, basically says, well, look, all those Second Corps batteries were then out of ammunition when the attack got up onto this part of the field. And Hunt accused Hancock of basically screwing up Hunt's grand plan to kind of hit the Confederates in what Hunt referred to as a crossfire. Hunt actually said, had those Second Corps guys conserved their ammunition, I don't even think they would have hit the Union lines. Whether that's true or not, folks, that's what Hunt said. So again, it's this back and forth between 2 good officers, but with very distinct training, infantry and artillery.
And I think a point that we can also make here, because we made it on the first video we did related to this attack on July 3rd, to Pickett's charge, is that if you think the Union Army is the only person or the only group that has this problem, you'd be wrong, because Longstreet is the operational commander over there for the attack on July 3rd. We've got the supports. Some people don't realize, are they really under his command? Are they not?
Yeah.
He got overall command of the artillery. Who has that? So the Confederates have similar issues to this, because Longstreet has been placed in operational command for that attack on July 3rd. And now you've got Hancock over here, who's in operational command over here, and he's got some of the same issues. So it's interesting. Both armies are grappling with some of this, how command works out in the American Civil War.
Yeah, and one last point I'll add, this debate did not end on July 3rd.
No, right.
Egos, folks, egos.
Right.
Hancock and Hunt wrote about this and talked about this really for the remainder of their lives, each one convinced that he was in the right.
And then think about how much ink would have been spilled if they'd have lost. Of course, they ended up winning.
Exactly.
If it had been a losing situation, it'd been even worse. Now, we're going to leave here. We're going to leave this artillery line, and we're going to go down and pick up part of this narrative right over here over my left shoulder. And Abby, if you want to go down, right before you get to the Pennsylvania Memorial, we're going to make a quick stop at the Running Rifleman, which is where the 1st Minnesota is, because the Shoei unit that was on July 2nd pretty much decimated in the fighting and ends up getting put on July 3rd. And we're going to mention again, pick it up back again when we talk about the defense. Some of the defenders here on July 3rd, 1863, for both the Second Corps, the First Corps, and you've got some Third Corps units that come up and join this. Some of these defenders do have fighting on July 1st and 2nd. It's not just on July 3rd. Most of them, you're going to see the bulk of the fighting on the third day of the battle for the Union defense. But we've got a couple interesting stories we're going to pass along. All right, we're going to pick up a little further down the line. All right, we're standing right next to the First Minnesota Memorial here, and this monument is most known for July 2nd, 1863. This regiment is most known for July 2nd, 1863, but I wanted to make a little stop here just to talk a little bit about some of the units that go into the Union defense here. Now, right over here behind where Jim and I are standing is where the charge of the First Minnesota takes place on the late afternoon into evening for July 2nd, 1863. And you've all heard the story. This 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment has about 262 men in the battle. They charge in over here behind me on July 2nd against a large number of Confederate soldiers. And all but 47 of them are killed, wounded, or captured. And they're led by a captain named Nathan Messick, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Captain Messick here in just a few minutes. But this regiment is rejoined on the evening of the 2nd by two of these companies, I think two, and they're put back into, one or two, put back into Pickett's charge. And they're actually put in the center of the line. They're moved further to the right, and they will be part of the Union defense, which leads me to want to have a discussion quickly here about some of these units that are in the defense for the Union line on July 3rd. We mentioned them earlier. Some of these are engaged in previous days of the battle, and the 1st Minnesota is one of them. Now, one of them, Jim, that we hear about all the time, I'm getting tired of hearing it, is the 20th Maine Infantry Regiment, because in Gettysburg, the movie, in Killer Angels, the novel, the 20th Maine is taken from the top of Big Round Top and sent to the very center of the Union line for July 3rd. And we know, folks, this just isn't right. It's not true.
Isn't true.
It's not historically correct. Joshua Chamberlain did not go over there where Armstead was. He had a great view of this action, probably near where the New Jersey Brigade marker is, just north of where Little Round Top is. And we actually could, let's pan around, Abby. Maybe we can show where that is. That first little hill that's off over to the left of the view over the large tree that's standing in the distance across from the New York Auxiliary Monument. That little hill over there, where the New Jersey Brigade Memorial today, and it was clear, part of it was clear, is where Chamberlain was for July 3rd, 1863. So some of these units involved on the second day's battle, first day's battle, put in the center of the Union line. Unfortunately for the First Minnesota, shattered here on July 3rd, July 2nd, 1863, and then put in for July 3rd, Jim. So I know this was a stop I wanted to have.
Yes,
I don't know how you.
You know what? Before somebody says, Wayne, you didn't show us the monument, even though we assume a lot of people know, maybe we should pan this way just to get a look at it. So we're talking about the July 2nd primary monument. Many of you have undoubtedly seen this, but here it is. And, you know, again, I'll just add, I'm not a 20th Maine basher. In fact, I get tired of seeing all the 20th Maine bashing on social media. But, yeah, we made it like, 3 stops before we had to invoke the movie into our tour today. I love the movie, but I'm kind of getting tired of it being brought up all the time. It is what it is. I love it, but... You know,
I do too. It's not I don't like it, but for a point of clarification, because as battlefield guides, at least early when the movie came out, it's one of the first questions we got from a lot of people is what was the role of the 20th Maine on the third day's battle? And luckily for them, they're going to be in a reserve situation, like a lot of units that suffer so badly. But some of these units on July 2nd suffer badly and then get put in on July 3rd, what's left of them. So that's pretty bad.
And I'll just make one more comment on that before I move on. You know, the 20th Maine and Little Round Top gets so much attention from that movie, relevant to what we're doing today. I think Pickett's charge is the best part of that movie.
Oh, yeah.
I think they do a great job with it. Not always accurate, but a great job dramatically with it. And folks, it's one of the things that, 30 years ago, got me interested
Sure.
in the July 3rd assault. So thanks for that.
Get the extended version, so you Kemper get wounded and all that. I mean, and that really is as accurate as it's depicted. That's what we have an account of a lot of that happening. So there's some great scenes that are in there, and we certainly don't want to take down any of those. We think that's good, but we do want to make a historical clarification point here for July 3rd. 20th Maine not involved on the 3rd. And yet we've got a lot of units that fought heavily on this.
1st Minnesota is involved on July 3rd, and we're going to see that second monument.
All right, we're going to pick up at our next stop, because it's one of my favorite things to talk about, which is some of the regular Army units that are here. And I want to tell a little story at the regular Army battery for Thomas, Evan Thomas's battery here, which is a regular Army unit fought at Gettysburg. Next stop. All right, we're right opposite of where the Pennsylvania Memorial is for Battery C of the 4th United States Artillery Regiment. One of my favorite things to talk about are the United States regular troops that fought here in the Battle of Gettysburg. We've probably got over 4,000 of them, and there are regular batteries involved at almost every part of the battlefield. And this is one of them that is involved not just on July 2nd, Jim, but also on July 3rd. And I like this story about Lieutenant Evan Thomas, because Thomas is the son of the Adjutant General of the entire United States Army, who has his office in Washington, D.C., and that is Lorenzo Thomas. So if you're Evan Thomas and you want a commission at the beginning of the outbreak of the war, there aren't enough West Pointers basically to fill the commissions. So there's a lot of civilian appointments at the time of the Civil War, even in the regular Army, and Evan Thomas is one of those. He gets a regular Army commission. He's born in 1843, so he's in his 20th year here in the Battle of Gettysburg. He gets a regular Army commission in 1861, and here on July 2nd, this unit participates. It also participates on the 3rd and gets involved in an early morning cannonade while they're shuffling the positions, and caissons in this unit are blown up, and there's at least some indication that they turned these guns and fired into Kemper's brigade when it advanced over your shoulder here for July 3rd. Thomas stays in the United States Regular Army, and in 1873, at what is now the Lava Beds National Park, he is killed in action fighting the Modocs in April of 1873. And Thomas is buried in Washington, D.C. So here's a guy that survives the Battle of Gettysburg like so many others. Jim, you profiled the men that are at Little Bighorn. You profiled a number of others. We've got so many of these men that choose the Army as a career. So he gets a civilian commission. He chooses to stay in the Army, and then he's later killed in action in April of 1873 at the Battle of the Lava Beds is what they actually called it. So just an interesting story about one regular artillerist here in the Battle of Gettysburg. And we could give so many other stories. I know you love to do the Little Bighorn connections and the other connections.
I think it's a fascinating story. I mean, as you know, I'm a huge enthusiast of the American West. Arguably, I'm into that more than the Civil War. And like you said, to think about how many of these guys go on after Gettysburg, after 1865, after Appomattox, and in some cases still meet grisly ends on other battlefields.
Yeah. Some of these men have a really, really long history in the military, and we forget about it. I really like this stop as part of our July 3rd Union Defense because it is a monument that you drive past hundreds of times. And my guess is nobody ever got out really and looked at it and said, oh, what did these men do? We don't know a lot about their participation here July 3rd, but we do know they are here, and they're supporting the Vermonters and firing into the right flank of where Pickett's men would have been here for July 3rd. So just an interesting story, I think. Now we're going to pick up and head over to pick up the left of this Union defense, which would be the Vermont Brigade, as part of this assault for July 3rd in defense. All right, that's going to be our next stop. All right, we just came up from Thomas's battery.
Walking Wednesday.
We did walk, everybody, even though we didn't cover all that while we were in there. So, and it's hot, and sure beats the first video. We're either freezing to death or we're burning up, Jim. We've got to come up with some idea.
We've run the gamut of all the seasons here in Gettysburg doing these videos for you folks, doing it for you.
The stuff we wouldn't do, right? Or we would do. All right, we're here. The monument directly over here behind me is the Vermont State Monument. It has Brigadier General George J. Standard up on the top of it, who commands the Vermont Brigade, which is on the extreme left of this Union defense for July 3rd, 1863. This is a brigade that's actually part of the First Corps. And was not involved in the first day's Battle of Gettysburg. It's not involved in first day's Battle of Gettysburg. It's moved over here and participates some on the second and then here on the third. These are 9-month regiments, so they're huge. They're huge. There are 2 other regiments that are part of this brigade, the 12th Vermont and 15th Vermont, that are actually guarding wagon trains south of Gettysburg. And they are not part of this defense. So we're talking about, everybody, 3 regiments of Vermonters, the 13th, the 14th, and the 16th Vermont Infantry Regiment. And their combined number is just under 2,000 men. They got a huge number of troops that are here when you count just the 3 regiments alone that are out here. And once again, not seeing any action on the first, limited action other times, but basically intact here. For July 3rd.
And they've been in the defenses of Washington and are new to the Army of the Potomac. Right. They'd only been added to the Army of the Potomac a few days before.
Right. So, and these units are scheduled to rotate out of service. These are 9-month units, and they're scheduled to go out right after the Battle of Gettysburg.
Standard implies that because the enlistments are about to expire, standard implies that he's having a little trouble motivating them at this point. And as they go through Frederick, with the choices of alcohol and things of that nature available in what was a large city like Frederick at the time, Standard talks about that he's having trouble keeping them in order, keeping them in line, and that he says something to the effect of, at this point, the men's hearts are not into it because they know these enlistments are going to expire. Now, we'll see how that changes on July 3rd, but that's at least the sit rep kind of moving up here.
Yeah, and you get so many days in the guardhouse, but guess what? When you're going into battle, folks, everybody's released from arrest. It's not gonna save you.
Such as Brown of the 13th, right?
You're not going to get saved on some of these unless you've done something really bad. Chances are you're going to get released from arrest. A rifle's going to be put back in your hand, and you're going to be all hands on deck. You're going to be right back in the middle of the battlefield.
And not to editorialize on one of my favorite topics, but I always hear people say Sickles' men got drunk in Frederick, and they had a hard time getting them back in the ranks. No, folks, it was other guys. In this case, some issues with the First Corps. So remember that too.
We had to bring Sickles up.
We had to bring Sickles up. Hey, if we're going to bring up the movie, we're going to bring up Sickles. All our topics.
That's fair enough.
Back to you, Wayne.
So we had the cannonade on July 3rd. It goes from about 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock on the 3rd day's battle here. And pretty much for the Union Army, it kills or wounds Union troops, it takes out Union artillery, but it doesn't accomplish what Lee wants it to accomplish. Got a lot of overshots here on July 3rd. So this line is pretty much intact. At 3 o'clock, the Confederates are going to appear over on Seminary Ridge. And if we swing around, we can take a look at where we're at. We've got, Jim. We got the Cadore barn, which is the newer barn, not the barn that was here during the battles, we've said in some other videos that are here. The house that's obscured by some trees, the Emmitsburg Road where the truck is going down. If we swing around and we cover, you've got the Klingel Farm with the red barn and white house. It's off the left of the view and all the way down to the Sherfy barn. And then above it, if you look off way in a distance, I hope Abby can see that. I know we've got this tree that's here. You can see the Longstreet Tower as well that's down there. This field that's right over here in front of us is going to be the field that Kemper's Brigade will be involved in, and that the Vermonters will go out, and they've got a great opportunity here once the advance starts because they can strike the Union line from a couple different directions. We should say that out in this field, off to the left of your view, to the south, will be 2 brigades of Anderson's division of A.P. Hill's Corps, and these will be the brigades of Captain Wilcox and David Lang, Floridians and Alabamans, respectively. And those men will be on the extreme right of the Confederate line, supporting Pickett. Now, I've seen a bunch of stuff, Jim, where they keep talking about second wave. These men are to support Pickett. It's pretty clear they're to be right up front, right?
Yeah, I think we're still hoping we're going to do a Wilcox-Lang video at some point. But in a nutshell, Wilcox and Lang are basically ordered to go forward and support Pickett's right flank. As
Right.
you said, it's not really a quote-unquote second wave, although I think there's some compelling evidence for that on other parts of the field.
Sure.
They're supposed to be supporting Pickett's right, but as you see the field behind us, which, by the way, is 2 cars pass here. By the way, that view behind us, Wayne, is one of my favorite views on the third day battlefield. You talked about the opportunity, and in my mind's eye, I can literally see that field filled with Confederate troops. But Kemper's guys are kind of going obliquely towards us, while Wilcox and Lang, who will come to at a later time, are going straight in.
So we're gonna leave here. We're gonna walk over and we're gonna take a look at where Hancock's memorial is to where he was wounded. Whether he was or he wasn't wounded is another thing. But take some advice from 2 men that this is what we've done for a lot of years. If you want to see this attack for July 3rd and you want a great view where there isn't a lot of people, don't stop at the angle where it's going to be overcrowded with 100,000 people. We're not saying don't go there. Be sure to go there. But if you want to sit and contemplate this, you want to look at the battlefield, you want to see the whole expanse of it for July 3rd, come right out here to near where General Hancock was wounded and also where the Vermonters are, and you're going to get a great overview of that. I think that's...
Agree.
There's no question. All right, everyone. We're going to try to take a little walk, Jim, and we're going to go over to where we think General Hancock was wounded, at least where the memorial is, and there's a discussion about that.
Yeah.
And we're also going to discuss the movements of the Vermonters here for July 3rd, 1863, because the Vermonters are going to be in position over here behind where your view is. They're actually going to move out here in front of us and make this strike against the troops.
It's
so
the most difficult maneuver the Army of the Potomac makes today. So, all right, YouTube, watch Jim and Wayne walk.
So the good time to do this, we picked to do this, everybody, even though it's the summertime, we're doing this in the morning because we realize that there isn't as many visitors here on the morning as we have later in the afternoon. And it's also getting hot. So this is a good time to come out. I love coming out on the battlefield early in the morning or later in the evening because it's pretty much cleared out. All right. Here. Okay. This is a monument I think everybody has seen sooner or later for July 3rd. All right. The memorial to Hancock being wounded on the 3rd day of the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm going to stand sort of right over here. Jim, why don't you talk a little bit about the Vermonters and their movement here for July 3rd?
All right,
and
we can do that.
Go in and talk a little bit about Hancock's wounding.
Okay, so then again, assuming, Abby, you can kind of get the camera panning into that field behind us, maybe sort of looking towards the red Kadori barn is our landmark. You know, as I just said a few moments ago, this movement by Stannard's Vermonters is the most difficult maneuver that any Union infantry makes in the defense of this charge. So what happens, folks, Kemper's brigade, which is the right of Pickett's division, as we've talked about, is basically making an oblique through the field behind us as, again, they cross the road near the Klingel farm. They're coming through the field behind us and pivoting at least at one point then in this direction to try to strike the Union line. Well, Winfield Hancock, commander of the 2nd Corps, George Stannard, brigade commander, some of the regimental commanders, success has many authors, folks, are kind of in this vicinity talking about what they see, and they see an opportunity to strike the Confederates in the flank. So again, whether Hancock orders it, whether Stannard orders it, 2 of Stannard's Vermont regiments, the 16th Vermont and the 13th Vermont, are basically going to, more or less in layman's terms, pivot out of the Union position and face the Confederates in that direction to strike them in the flank. Wayne, I thought we would demonstrate this. You'll be the 13th Vermont, I'll be the 16th Vermont, okay? You just watched us walk, folks. Now watch Jim and Wayne pivot. It's going to be very exciting. All right, so
we're going to put her back to the camera.
Yes.
Okay.
Back to the
maybe
camera?
Abby ought to come around maybe and get the front of us.
Okay.
Or just do the side of us and show up that way. That's great.
We put our back to Abby and then told her to swing around to the front. So you got that? All right.
All right.
I'll be the 16th, which was on the left of this maneuver. As Wayne said, these are very large regiments. And again, in layman's terms, they're going to kind of pivot like this.
And I'd be the 13th then.
Yes,
I guess I'm
yes.
the 13th.
Yep,
regiment.
13th Vermont.
All right.
So now what we're doing is we're basically firing into Kemper's right and rear as they move up towards the angle. Now, Kemper's guys were aware of this, and they refused a regiment or two on their right to try to stop this, but the destructive fire from Stannard's men poured into Kemper's lines was described by everybody as being pretty intense, pretty extreme, and it's one of the things, you know, we talked about in video one, the difficulty the Confederates have protecting their flanks. And here's a great example of their inability to do that.
And then the 14th regiment then comes out. So the problem with the advance, as we talked about, if we do a video on Wilcox and Lang, we can talk about it, but they didn't start at the same time that Pickett did. So there is a gap between where Kemper is and then on the extreme right, which is behind your view, where Wilcox and Lang's men, and that's going to allow the 14th Vermont then to be able to come up. And at the same time, the 13th and 16th are off over hitting the end of Kemper's line. The 14th is going to swing up and come in and strike the left that's over here. And like you said, for 9-month troops, these are 9-month troops, for them to carry this off in the middle of the battle, to me, that's leadership. Leadership here is great. And whether it was Stannard's idea, whether it was Randall, the colonel of the 13th, I mean, we don't know exactly who's everybody. Like you said, it had success, has many authors. Hancock ordering, we don't know exactly what went on here, but this allowed the Union Army to interpose itself between these two attacking columns and rake the heck out of both the left and the right flank of this Confederate line.
And since we brought Wilcox and Lang into it, I'll just add, you know, in addition to now, they're also getting hit by the 16th, who kind of comes back and then participates.
Comes back around again.
In this maneuver, but Wilcox and Lang are also getting hit by Freeman McGilvery's artillery, who we saw in an earlier stop. So that defense is coming together.
Now, Hancock is the overall operational commander, as you talked about, Jim. He is riding, it looks like, south in this, and then he is hit, right? What do we know about this marker? What do we know about his wounding?
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Abby, you want to pan? We'll pan over to the monument here. Winfield Hancock. So, as part of this maneuver, he seems to be talking to Stannard and the Vermont officers. If my memory serves, Hancock actually says that as they were starting the maneuver, finishing talking, I believe if I recall correctly, Hancock actually says he turned towards the copse of trees. So he was riding more up in this direction when he was struck by a Confederate projectile. Now, Hancock was mounted, and so the projectile basically goes through the pommel of his saddle, drives the bullet, wood from the saddle, nails, all of that stuff, basically into Hancock's groin area, right? Folks, this is an ugly wound. One person who looked at it afterwards said it looked like he had basically been stabbed in the groin by a large butcher's knife, all right? Especially the guys watching in the audience can attest, that's gotta hurt, right? So Hancock is unhorsed, blood profusely coming out of this wound. He says to the effect of, get something to tie this up before I bleed to death. But Hancock refuses to be removed from the field until the matter is decided. Now, I'm not going to make a big deal today about whether or not the monument is in the right location or not. When Hancock visited the battlefield after the war, shortly before his death, he said he did not think this location, the location that was marked, was accurate. And people always say, well, 20 years later, how could he remember that? Well, one of the things he said as he was lying on the field here for some time behind what he said was a low disintegrating wall, Hancock said, I don't recall any boulders in the vicinity. Folks, there are the boulders that mark the position today, and Hancock said he did not recall any of those in the vicinity. So there's a debate about this. I'm not really going to get into that. We'll talk more about his recovery. The wound takes a long time to heal. And so he goes back home to Philadelphia to recuperate. And, it's just not healing properly. Finally, one day at his home, his doctor basically says, assume a position like you're on a saddle. Hancock assumes the riding position. The doctor goes in with the probe. This is several weeks later, folks. I think November, if I remember correctly. And the doctor pulls out a ball and some of the, other projectiles. And finally, by the late fall of 63, this thing starts to heal. But Hancock was never really the same after Gettysburg, as he was on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, when he superbly thundered up and down this battlefield.
And he has to sort of, later, even when he comes back to the Army, he has to sort of go in and out of command. This wound oozes, parts of the bone come out.
Right.
This is a wound that will affect him for the rest of his life. He dies on active duty in 1886. And this wound is, he died of complications of diabetes, a carbuncle. But this wound is going to be terrible for his health, for the rest of his life.
So even though he survives and lives many years afterwards, another Gettysburg casualty.
Another Gettysburg casualty.
Now
he's going to leave the field, as Jim said, but only after it's toward the very end. And he supposedly sends, or he does, not supposedly, he sends to Meade that I did not leave while a rebel was upright, or he says something to that effect.
And he's encouraging me, push the 5th Corps and the 6th Corps forward, and we will finish the enemy. And my 2nd Corps guns were out of ammunition, or removed one of the batteries, and I want you to hold somebody accountable for mismanaging the artillery. So he's thinking, folks, and maybe getting a dig in at General Hunt all the way through this.
All right, we're going to leave here, and we're going to pick up this narrative. Just, Abby, if you want to pan off, you'll see the large Washington monument-looking memorial. That's the monument to the U.S. regulars. And in front of it, you'll see another monument. Looks exactly like it, only it's much smaller in miniature version. And that's the monument to the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Infantry Regiment, placed here for July 3rd with that surviving captain, Nathan Messick, from this assault on July 2nd, over by our next stop. All right, I said we were going to stop at 1st Minnesota. Maybe...
That's all right.
I lied. We've always got something more we want to talk about. We're at the black walnut tree, which is referred to as the Gibbon tree. And this is supposedly near the location where Brigadier General John Gibbon, in charge of the 2nd Division, 2nd Corps, who commands out here on July 3rd, is wounded on the 3rd day's battle. And Gibbon is a tremendous part of this defense. He's got a fascinating history. So he's born in 1827 in Holmesburg, Pennsylvania. That is a suburb of Philadelphia. And when he is about 10 years old, his father, who is a doctor, moves to Raleigh, North Carolina, and becomes an assessor in the United States Mint. Gives up basically being a physician. Now, Gibbon has multiple brothers in the service. He's got 3 of them in the service of the Confederacy. And the youngest brother, Nicholas, some accounts have him born in Holmesburg because he's born in 1837, but other accounts have him born in North Carolina. So he spent his whole life, basically, in the state of North Carolina. So John Gibbon's youngest brother, Nicholas, is affiliated with the 28th North Carolina, and he has an older brother, Robert, who is a surgeon, who is a brigade surgeon, but also affiliated with the 28th North Carolina. Looks like these men are here. That's our best guess. We're not sure on some of them, or at least one of them.
There was no indication that they weren't here.
Right, exactly. And then we have a third brother who is not here, who had been in the United States Navy. His name is Lardner Gibbon, and he lived down in Florida. This man surveyed the Amazon. I mean, he's really famous. But John Gibbon, born in 1827, graduates from West Point, 1847, I believe is the date, is an artillerist serving out in Utah at the beginning of the war, and he is serving with none other than John Buford. They're both at Fort Crittenden in Utah. They both get offers. Buford from the governor of Kentucky, and now Gibbon from the governor of North Carolina to take southern commissions. And both of these men choose to stay with the North at the time of the Civil War, but it's really going to divide both their families. These brothers that are fighting on opposite sides. Gibbon has a lot of his family members here. And at Gettysburg, he's in command of 2nd Division, 2nd Corps. He was commander before this of the famed Iron Brigade. He's got tremendous history. Battery B, 4th U.S., which is at Antietam.
Wrote that artillerist manual, which is highly influential.
Exactly. And Jim, he's wounded here, probably at the end of the cannonade, nearby the black walnut tree, from what we know. And they tried to save this tree. They actually put, if Abby comes in here, you can see some cement that's down inside here. It's my understanding there was an effort by William C. Storick, who was the superintendent of guides, to write to the park commissioner in 1917 that they were putting cement in some of these witness trees that they considered valuable to save. I believe this one is the only one left that they tried or made that attempt to do. But in 1917, there's a letter from William Storick that talks about trying to preserve this. Part of the top of it was taken off in a storm a couple years ago. This tree, folks, has been through a lot. If it could only talk here.
Now, during that visit, when Hancock came back, he thought...
We got buses going by, everybody. This is artillery.
During that later visit, when Hancock came back here, Hancock noted that a lot of the ground around here had changed and a lot of trees had been cut down. So Hancock wasn't even sure that the gibbon tree was still standing. No doubt a witness tree here, but again, take your pick. And it just goes to show you, memories fade, times on the battlefield. 20 years later, it's hard to remember it, but a witness tree, no doubt.
Now, during the battle, right at the very end of the cannonade, Gibbon is struck in the left arm and shoulder area by an artillery fragment that basically breaks his shoulder. It's a pretty severe wound that he suffers here, but he survives that wound. He goes on to later commands in the Civil War, and he's got an illustrious career after the war. Jim, he's got Indian War connections that are pretty interesting.
Yeah, he does. I'll add, too, if I'm not mistaken, he is back here in November to witness the Gettysburg Address.
Right.
So John Gibbon, not only does he have this storied military history, this interesting family background, he witnesses the Gettysburg Address. And to Wayne's point, and it goes back to what we were talking about Thomas earlier, Gibbon is among those officers who stays in the Army, goes out west, and really has a long post-Civil War career. Gibbon is probably best known outside of the Civil War for his role in the 1876 Little Bighorn campaign, in which George Armstrong Custer and more than 200 members of the 7th Cavalry lost their lives. Gibbon was commanding one of the columns in the field. Eventually, Gibbon was also then under Alfred Terry. And in some of the Little Bighorn literature, they're a little critical of John Gibbon's performance during that campaign. We won't go into that here, but I'll point out, if you're an Indian Wars enthusiast watching this right now, whatever you think of his performance in 1876, heck of a Civil War soldier, great career. He did reconcile with those three brothers after the war, so at least they didn't hold the grudge within the family. Gibbon died in the 1890s and is buried in Arlington National Cemetery.
Right, and so once again, the Gibbon tree, a witness tree here in the Battle of Gettysburg. And Jim, I did say we were going to talk about first Minnesota.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's swing around here and we'll walk. We're going to go by a couple of these memorials and we'll get over to where the 1st Minnesota is located. These are some of the units from the 1st Corps that were fighting on July 1, the 22 York State Militia. It's right here. So when we talk about Doubleday's command, here's the 82nd New York. Some of these units come over here. Stone's Brigade also has a memorial. That's, Abby, if you want to swing around here, there's a monument to Stone's Brigade, one of the Bucktail units that are here. So some of these men are brought back over here after July 1, and they're held here at the center of the line. Well, guess what? Now we've got Pickett's charge, and they're participating in various ways, which a lot of it we don't have full counts on. So here is the Union defensive line for July 3rd for the 2nd Union Army Corps. It goes straight up to the copse of trees, the umbrella-shaped clump of trees that you see in the distance. We're south of that, of course. And this line goes along these entrenchments, which are dug here by the Union troops. The stone wall that the Philadelphia Brigade is up against doesn't come that far down, doesn't come this far south. So there are entrenchments that are dug by the troops that are here. And I wanted to get everybody over here to the 1st Minnesota because this is the memorial to the 1st Minnesota. And Nathan Messick survives this attack on July 2nd, 1863. On July 3rd, the survivors of the 1st Minnesota are brought over here. Now, he gives the total number engaged in the battle at 330. So he's got his 47 men augmented by those that join on the 2nd to come over here. And Nathan Messick is in charge. Now, he's born in 1827, and we don't know I don't know the exact date of his birth. I'm sure somewhere we can find it. He's born in New Jersey, and then in the 1840s, he ends up going to Indiana. and he becomes a shoemaker in Indiana. But what's interesting, and one of the reasons why he gets his commission, is he becomes an Indiana volunteer soldier in the Mexican War, because he's born in 1827. Mexican War is fought in 1846 to 1848. He's able to get service there, and I'm sure that helped him when he went to go get this commission. Now, he's at the Battle of Bull Run. This is one of the first regiments sworn into federal service, and he will get sick in the winter of 1862-63, goes home. He's got chronic hepatitis. He's got a very, very bad case of it. And instead of staying home, instead of taking an honorable discharge from medicine, he comes back with his unit to fight here at the Battle of Gettysburg because he said the troops needed him. Now, this is a guy that's ill. He could have an honorable way out. He's got several children, of course, that are in Faribault, Minnesota. That's where he settled, Faribault, Minnesota, which is south of the Twin Cities. That's where he lives after moving from Indiana over to Minnesota. And on July 3rd, he's going to be right over here behind where I'm at when an artillery shell strikes him in the head during the cannonade, and he is instantly killed. His materials, his epaulet, things are taken off of him, and they're sent to his wife, Amanda, in Faribault, but he gives up his life here, and he's a casualty buried, Jim, in the Gettysburg National Cemetery, defending this line on July 3rd, but actually killed in the cannonade from a regiment that was really shot up on the second day in Gettysburg.
Yeah, and I would just point out, we stopped before at the Second Day Monument, easily one of the most viewed, if not visited, regimental monuments on the battlefield. How many people even know that this one is here, representing the July 3rd position? So, folks, next time you're here, go see the other 1st Minnesota Monument, but take a moment to kind of walk this part of the line and, ponder the sacrifice of Messick and other members of the 1st Minnesota.
And over the years, the access to the park has changed.
Yeah,
there was, right where Abby is filming, you can still see the course of the old road, Harrow Avenue, which used to be an avenue, folks, that went by the copse of trees, swung down here, came right into what is now the Hancock Avenue. Cars used to go down this, and so these monuments were much more visited than they are now. We also had an avenue inside the angle, Webb Avenue, which was around only taken out in the late 80s.
Yeah.
So this avenue here showed that these memorials got a lot more visitation when it was here. Now you'll have to walk up, like Jim said.
Yeah, we even have that one tablet over here, still in the middle of the field, kind of facing what would today seem to be the wrong direction, and that's because the old Harrow Avenue went through here. Okay, we've moved down now. We're near the 20th Massachusetts Monument, the famous pudding stone. Going to talk just a little bit about two of the brigade commanders in John Gibbon's division. Wayne, Alexander Webb always gets the attention because it's his brigade that is ultimately going to be near the angle in the copse of trees. But the other two brigades in John Gibbon's division were defending the part of the line that we're standing near right now. And that would be the brigade under Brigadier General William Harrow, who was a 40-year-old former attorney, born in Kentucky, and I think also from Indiana. He's going to command one of Gibbon's brigades. Harrow was a friend of President Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln knew him from the old circuit court days. And although not a professional soldier, Harrow did serve in a lot of other earlier engagements, but there was always some question, it seems, about Harrow's leadership abilities and possibly even his sobriety. But he is here at Gettysburg, commanding the 1st Brigade under General Gibbon. The other brigade then will be under 26-year-old Colonel Norman J. Hall. Now, Hall was originally born in New York, although later on the family moved to Monroe County, Michigan. Monroe, Michigan is later the adopted hometown of George Armstrong Custer. So Custer tends to overshadow Hall, but again, Hall has that part with Monroe County. Anyways, the 26-year-old Hall, unlike Harrow, Hall was a professional soldier, a West Point graduate. Hall had been at Fort Sumter at the outset of the American Civil War. There's one story that Hall was burned trying to save one of the American flags at Fort Sumter and reportedly singed off his eyebrows while doing that. Hall will basically command the 3rd Brigade in Gibbon's division, and it will be Harrow on the left and Hall kind of a little bit over here behind him, kind of in the area where we're standing right now, or what would be behind Abby in the camera. Those are the two other brigades besides Alexander Webb. Wayne is going to tell you some stories about a regiment or two in those brigades, like I believe the 20th Massachusetts. So we'll turn it back over to Wayne.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And this thing about, we were just discussing off camera, this thing about Norman Hall, singeing his eyebrows. If it isn't true, it ought to be. It's just one of those great stories of the Civil War. We know he's there. We know he rescues his flag. And in Hall's case, what's kind of sad is that Hall dies of disease very shortly after the Civil War.
Yeah,
he's sick most of the time. He's got a very promising career, it looks like. And unfortunately, it's cut short, like so many officers, because of disease in the war.
Well, since we're going there, I'll just mention Harrow, who, again, nobody ever talks about.
Right.
When was the last time you took a battlefield tour that talked about General Harrow? Again, there are some questions about Harrow's leadership abilities. He will leave the Army of the Potomac, serve in the Atlanta campaign. Again, some questions there. But Harrow will die in a train accident, I believe, about 9 years or so later in the 1870s. So both different untimely ends. But I agree with you. Hall in particular is tragic because he dies young and dies of illness.
And it appears from the record, I don't know as much about Harrow, but it appears in the record from Hall that many of the senior officers thought he ought to have promotion. And had he not been sick and absent from the Army, he probably would have had. Probably would have had those. Now, one of the regiments in the brigade here is this one right here, which is the 20th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry Regiment. It's one of the most unusual monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield. This, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't know, is a Massachusetts pudding rock. The weight of this rock is 20 tons. The thing weighs like 40,000 pounds, and there are images of it coming off the railroad to get up here and to get in position. This is not the first location of this monument. And a little secret, we'll show you where this monument was, which very, very few people actually see, which is really, really interesting. But this memorial was for this regiment on July 2nd and 3rd. On July 2nd, the colonel of this unit, Paul Joseph Revere, he's the grandson of Paul Revere of the British fame of writing and telling that the British are coming.
That Paul Revere.
Paul Revere, of course, the only Paul Revere. This is Paul J. Revere's grandson, who's mortally wounded here on July 2nd. One of the members of this unit fighting here on July 3rd is one of the youngest commissioned officers, Jim, in the Army of the Potomac, and his name is Sumner Payne. Payne was born in May of 1845. He attended Harvard University, went out of Harvard, went into the 20th Mass, and at Gettysburg, he is 18 years old. His first battle is the Battle of Chancellorsville, where he's assigned to Company A of the 20th Massachusetts. And guess who commands it? Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., the Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, that has a long life. Holmes is wounded in May at the Battle of Chancellorsville. And so Sumner Payne comes to Gettysburg with this company. And he is here on July 3rd when he is hit, wounded, and he reportedly yells, "Isn't it glorious?" And he's killed right along behind where this line is. Once again, Sumner Payne, 18 years old, one of the youngest commissioned officers, killed here on July 3rd, defending against Pickett's charge for Kemper's brigade, and buried in the Gettysburg National Military Cemetery. A Harvard graduate, as were many in the 20th Massachusetts.
His famous last words. I hope you and I go out with something as poetic as that.
Isn't it glorious? This is a guy shot. He has to go down on his knee, and isn't it glorious? So he's wounded here in the Battle of Gettysburg, and boy, this weighs heavy on the men who are survivors of this. There's a lot of information on this unit. Henry Livermore Abbott, who is a captain, he's a major, later becomes major of the unit. He has a great set of letters. It's my favorite book.
I was going to share that with the viewers. That is possibly Wayne's favorite Civil War book.
Fallen Leaves is the name of it. It's published by Kent State University Press in about 1986. 86, I think. It's an early book. You can look it up online. Fallen Leaves is published very early. Early for a set of letters, I guess, 40 years ago. And it's one of my favorites. Very literate, and Henry Livermore Abbott's attending Harvard when Robert Gould Shaw is there. Number of these officers that are there, and unfortunately, Abbott dies in the Battle of the Wilderness. But he's here. He's here at Gettysburg and has a wonderful account, a letter written to his father about this action that's here. Now, Jim, we know that the 20th Mass is shooting right out here in front of us where Kemper's brigade is. And Kemper himself probably goes down right along with the fence line.
Somewhere immediately behind Wayne and I. Yeah.
And when he goes down, the troops, Union troops, come out to try to get him.
Right.
And eventually he's put in a blanket. He's dropped at one of these points, and he's taken back behind the line. And of the 3 brigadiers that are in Pickett's command, Armstead, Garnett, Kemper's the only one to actually survive this assault. But he's wounded right out here behind us, right in front of where the 20th Mass.
And again, so many people go to the high water mark, the angle, the copse of trees. They study, they focus where Armstead hits the wall. Heck, even we're guilty of focusing on Armstead. But folks, while you're here, take a look. This is, as Wayne said, the area where Kemper crashes into the wall. By that point, formations are probably mostly gone, but fighting right here at the wall that people often don't think about.
There are 3 areas at the copse of trees and then 2 south of it, basically. And we'll show you one of those here in just a minute, that where the Confederates break through. They probably don't break through here, and I'll tell you, but they're right in front.
It's pretty close.
Right in front. And there's some rough ground out here in front of where the 20th Massachusetts Memorial is. The slashing, it's sometimes called, this rough ground, and that's going to give the Confederates some protection here. But there are breakthroughs at multiple points of this line. I don't think there's any breakthrough north, although some of the Confederates in this assault may argue against that. But north of where the copse of trees are, I don't think the Confederates, at least those that are not prisoners, are dead or slumped over the wall dead if they got that far.
Well, we're counting Armistead as a breakthrough, aren't we?
Right.
Okay, so
and there's certainly one just south of the copse, and there's one down here where we just walked by at Rorty's battery.
Right, okay.
The Battery B, 1st New York Light Artillery, right near where the 1st Minnesota is. We know Rorty's men. You're going to talk a little bit next, and we're going to go next right up to where that breakthrough is, because you want to mention Andrew Cowan's battery.
I like Cowan.
So let's talk. We're going to go up a little further now, south of the copse of tree. All right, we're here next to the 59th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment. And right over here, standing behind Jim, is where the stone wall, it doesn't go down here today, but it's where the stone wall probably ends for the length of defense for Cemetery Ridge. And then if you come out over here behind me, you'll see an opening right here. We call this the gate. There was a farmer's access right along the stone wall out into the fields that are over here behind where Jim and I. And then south over here, Jim, is where the entrenchments are going to pick up. So the 59th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Max A. Thoman, or Thoman, depending on how you want to pronounce it. This man was a professional soldier. He'd been in the wars in Germany. He'd gone down to Nicaragua and been a filibuster. He's got a very, very interesting history. He's mortally wounded here in the Battle of Gettysburg. And once again, he is a casualty in the New York plot in the National Cemetery. He commands the 59th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment here in the battle. But the Confederates are going to come through, literally, right where we're standing here, up into this position. So this would be Kemper's brigade. It would be the right flank, and we could talk about what units we think were here. I think Jim had mentioned earlier the 24th Virginia and the 11th pretty much refuse flanks that are here. So probably the 1st Virginia, the 3rd and the 7th are off over here to the left, but somewhere right in here, which is the middle of Kemper's brigade, which seems to be why Kemper is also in front of it. That's right over here where we're at. So we're right in the gate where the Confederates actually have one of the 3 breakthroughs in this line.
And I'll just mention it because again, nobody ever talks about it. 2nd Division, 3rd Brigade. That's Hall's brigade. Right. Hall's brigade of Gibbon's division. Hall in particular says that when they have the Confederate breakthrough on Webb's part of the line, you know, Armistead and those guys, the famous breakthrough that we always talk about, Hall's brigade in particular is going to rush en masse towards the copse of trees. Again, no real regimental formations, just essentially everybody going in with a yell and trying to stop that breakthrough on Webb's front. So again, just since we're here, I'll point that out because when do you ever normally talk about what Harrow and Hall are doing during the charge?
Right, and we've covered some of this, but we've spent a lot of time, as you know, as Jim has said, we're guilty of being up into the copse of trees as well. We're south of the copse of trees that are here. I want to swing around, let Abby get some of this. So you can see the 69th Pennsylvania that's right over here. This is Bartle Webb's brigade.
Yeah, now we're in the Webb's line.
Over here behind me. We're going to walk up there next. Here's the copse of trees, just right over here over our shoulder. And Jim, I promised to show the viewers, because I just think it's really interesting, where the original position
Yeah.
of the 20th Massachusetts Memorial is. And I'd like to walk with Abby right here, because if you know where to look on the ground, you can still see it today.
Is it Walking Wednesday glorious, folks?
Yeah,
Isn't it glorious?
Something
There
that
you
you
go.
probably haven't seen here in the Battle of Gettysburg. And we know this because we have photographs of the 15th and 20th Massachusetts memorials that are over near here. And these photographs have the Kadori farm right in the background. And they don't line up in the present position of the monuments today, but they do line up where the monuments were originally. Now, why were they moved? One of the reasons why is because these monuments are some of the earliest memorials. Massachusetts puts up some of the earliest memorials on the battlefield. So once Pennsylvania and the others have to be in brigade line, it was decided these were going to be taken out of here and then moved into a brigade line configuration.
Yep.
This depression of ground with the rocks still here from where the base was is the base, or where the base stood, of the 20th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry Regiment. And Abby, if you swing around and look right here, you'll see where the Kadori farm is over here in the background. So right here where this base is where the 20th stood. The 15th is up closer, and there are two plaques put up for the 15th and 20th Mass. There's some of the original plaques that were on the battlefield. For many years they weren't here, and then the Park Service had them, got them back out here, which they're here. And right off to the left of your view is also in the road of where Harrow Avenue is. So let's remember the original avenue went by here. These monuments, would have been close to where that would have been. So the breakthrough on this line goes from here up against Andrew Cowan's battery of the 6th Union Army Corps. And Jim, I know you really like Cowan, so we can talk. You want to move up?
Yeah,
closer?
sure. Should we take a walk up to see Cowan?
Let's come up here and we'll get up a little closer. We'll pass the plaques to the 15th and 20th Mass. They're right over here in front of Jim and I. How far up do you want to go?
How about up here in front?
Okay.
In front of the guns.
All right. Here's the 20th Mass plaque. Maybe Abby can just get a shot of it so you can see. And then we're going to go to the one of the 15th, because the monument to the 15th stood right here where this piece of ground is right here. You can actually see a depression in the ground right here. This is where the monument to the 15th Mass stood. And then here's the plaque. So you can line up a picture of the 15th, the 20th that's in the background. It's right around in here is where the 15th memorial
Lost
is.
Gettysburg. People love this lost stuff.
Yeah,
You know
this
what I
is
mean?
sort of the move monuments.
Yeah.
And now we've got this battery of the 6th Corps. Cowan.
You know, the couple points, Wayne, I thought we'd kind of make here.
Sure.
As we now start to move closer to the copse of trees and the high water mark, you touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but of course everybody always says, oh, the Confederate cannonade was ineffective. It didn't accomplish anything. Well, it did have some effect.
Right.
One of the impacts it had, which we talked about at stop number 1, was disrupting Army headquarters, as Meade had to go to Powers Hill for a time and lost contact with some of his officers. But the other impact of this cannonade was the casualties suffered by Union batteries in and around the copse of trees and the high water mark. Hazard's Brigade of the 2nd Corps has the highest artillery casualties in the Army of the Potomac, and that's primarily because of July 3rd. Now, as you said, Cowan was part of the 6th Corps. He was not part of the 2nd Corps. Cowan, though, was brought in to replace Perrin's Rhode Island battery, which had to withdraw due to lack of ammunition and casualties. Cowan, 1st New York Independent, basically said that initially he was ordered by Doubleday to go in further down to the left, but he looked in this direction and he saw General Webb kind of waving his sword to get in here. And so Cowan moved the battery up closer to the copse of trees. Cowan's right was only a few yards from Cushing's left piece, which again gives you an idea of how close these guys are. I'm not going to go into a full biography on Cowan, but a couple things that he is noteworthy for, and I think we've done a good job of not reading to the audience today. I'm just going to read one particular quote or two, where Cowan talks about double canister at 10 yards. And so what Cowan said was, quote, "The rebel skirmishers had just commenced firing, and their second line was advancing. from the woods. The artillery fire was quite accurate and did much execution. Still, the rebel line advanced in a most splendid manner. I commenced firing canister at 200 yards, and the effect was greater than I could have anticipated. And later on, he goes on to say, I fired canister low, and my last charge, 2 rounds in each of the 6 guns, was fired when the enemy advanced in my front and only 10 yards distance. So imagine that double canister at only 10 yards. It's crazy.
Right, and that would be right behind where the viewers are.
Right.
I mean, we're right in front of where that is. We're right on the target. And that apparently wipes out. Cowan says it's a Confederate major, but it looks like it might be Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Colquitt of the. I think it's either the 3rd or the 7th. My memory now fails me, but we may know who this officer is because the other majors and lieutenant colonels are accounted for. We know what happened to them, but it looks like the officer that he's talking about. He says it's a major, but anyway, is just obliterated.
Swept
unfortunately,
away
swept away by this artillery fire. So once again, this artillery fire brought to bear not just in the cannonade, but in the Union defense by Hunt, very effective.
And I'll just mention too, friendly fire.
Yeah.
Because in front of Cowan is the 69th Pennsylvania and Webb's brigade, who Wayne pointed out a few moments ago. Cowan later, one of the reasons why I like him is he's kind of like a direct, kind of colorful writer. But Cowan later will criticize some of the 69th PA for seemingly running away in his front. And I think that's unfair because I think one of the problems the 69th is having is they're taking friendly fire in the back from Cowan.
Yeah, agreed.
And, Cowan says later, he has this account where he says one of the officers is running away, contorted in fear with a sword tucked under his arm, and he ran like a turkey. I think, and then another guy comes by and they try to stop him and they smash a coffee pot down over the guy's head and the guy keeps running with the coffee pot down around his ears. And Cowan says, I swore at him like a pirate, kind of thing. So it's colorful stuff, and I like pointing that kind of thing out because, we treat these guys like marble men, perfect heroes. These are real guys like you and me, and they go through a range of emotions.
A terrible situation.
Yeah, a terrible situation.
No
fear, confusion, and everything. So that's just a little bit on Cowan and the 1st New York Independent Battery. One of my favorite ones on this part of the field.
We want to move from here to the northern part of the copse of trees, but while we're doing that, I'd like to do that walking, Jim, because I want to talk a little bit about the copse of trees.
Sure, I think we got
maybe
to, right?
the history of it.
Right.
Before we start, let's let Abby pin the monument that looks like a teepee. The 42nd New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment, Chief Tamadid, the Delaware Indians, and move right down to where the monument is of the 19th Massachusetts. These are 2 regiments that are going to come right through this ground where we're standing. They're going to go right through the copse of trees right behind us to assault the breakthrough of the Confederate line. Now, we're going to move around and go over on the north side of the trees because we're going to talk about that. But let's pan back around this way. And Jim, maybe we can talk a little bit about the copse of trees.
Yeah,
and Abby, why don't you follow us while we're going to walk? We'll walk around. Let's talk a little bit about it. So we've got a fence around these trees because after the Battle of Gettysburg, after the Civil War, John Batchelder, the chief historian here at Gettysburg, made this into the high water mark monument. And veterans come and they start taking away the wood on these trees. Now, it's not just the tourists. It's the veterans doing that. And Batchelder also came out here, and it looks like it's probably Nicholas Cadore, is cutting down some of these trees. And he says in the 1870s, some of these trees, more than a dozen of them, were already on the ground. So the size of this has changed over time. These aren't the original trees, probably. They're probably offspring. As far as we know, they're offspring of the original trees. We don't know of any witness trees in there. And then, so Jim, about the target, I mean, this is an aiming point, right? Let's walk this way.
Yeah. So, as Wayne said, Batchelder's really responsible for, in a lot of ways, popularizing and commemorating the trees. But during an early visit with one of Pickett's staff officers, Walter Harrison, not to be confused with Harrison the actor, Walter Harrison, who's on Pickett's staff, during an early battlefield visit, Harrison basically said to the effect of, "Oh, we were targeting these trees as we as we came across the field.
Right.
And, you know, again, that starts a lot. We talked in video 1 about Cemetery Hill versus the copse of trees, so I'm not gonna repeat all of that. But certainly as you were going across the field, what they describe as these umbrella-shaped trees stood out among the horizon and certainly would have been a logical landmark for at least some of the troops to direct against. And I think that's what they're using the copse of trees for.
Yeah, some of the people that feel that it's not the aiming point or it's not the point of direction, and that's what Walter Harrison really says it is. Prominent point of direction.
Right.
They don't realize, I think, that there is a very early account of this, which is Walter Harrison. I mean, this man comes to the battlefield in 1868.
Right.
This is 5 years after Pickett's charge. So it's not 40 years after Pickett's charge.
Right.
And he talks about that. And in 1869, he publishes this work, Pickett's Men, A Fragment War History.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, it's 1870s when the work is published. 68, 69 must be when he actually shows
close
up.
enough for government work, folks.
Our memory, my memory is not what it used to be. So it's 69, I think, for when he visits. He writes in the back of the book, 1870, when this New York publisher actually puts it out. But it's only like 6 years after Pickett's charge, so it's very, very early. Right. So it's pretty clear that, in my view, and E. Porter Alexander writes it. I mean, there are other people that write it. Now, they write afterwards, but it's pretty clear that several people think this is an aiming point for the attack, where they're going to concentrate.
Or at least part of the attack. You know, if you're over there, you're aiming at something else. But if you're over here, these trees, everybody said these trees stood out on the horizon. It makes sense. Doesn't mean they're the military objective of the attack. Because, as I said in video 1, people get too hung up on the trees. Right. But obviously something to target as you're coming across the field.
All right, these are, let's take a look again here at the defensive line. It's 69 Pennsylvania, it's right over here behind me. 72nd Pennsylvania, 71st. Elements of the Philadelphia Brigade under the command of Alexander Stewart Webb. Webb, got a really important record. What am I trying to say? He's got a tremendous record in the Civil War.
Yeah,
so he's born in 1835. He's basically 28 years old here in the Battle of Gettysburg. He graduates from West Point in 1855. He's an instructor at West Point, and he is new to command here because the commanding officer of the Philadelphia Brigade, Patty Owen, and apparently Owen is running around the battlefield. There is a witness that Owen is here, but he doesn't have a command.
And Owen comes back later, so that's kind of a whole weird situation.
And apparently he had some drinking issues, and there are discipline issues in the Philadelphia Brigade. So Webb is asked right before the Battle of Gettysburg to come in here and shore up this discipline.
And Webb had come from the 5th Corps, where he was a close associate of George Meade.
So he's known. He's
so you see how these things are related.
Yeah. So this unit here, they're going to be in position here on July 3rd when the Confederates assault. It'll be a combination of Armstead's brigade, probably Garnett, some of Kemper's men are going to come over the stone wall, and they're actually going to attack here between 3 and 4 o'clock. Talked about it earlier on the previous videos. In the 69 Pennsylvania right here, the right flank companies, the little stone pillars that you see, are going to be struck by the Confederates and peeled back that are here. Meanwhile, the 72nd Pennsylvania, the man with the rifle, is up on the roadway. So let's swing around a little bit, Abby. Alexander Webb statue by the red SUV, and the 72nd Pennsylvania is probably right along where that roadway is, and there's a whole court battle fought over where the 72nd Pennsylvania ought to come in.
When in doubt, get the lawyers involved, people. The lawyers will simplify everything for you.
This goes all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to get this settled. The Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association wanted this monument up closer to the road. These guys wanted it down where it is, and you can see who won out on this. But anyway, the 72nd Pennsylvania is up along that road firing. The 69 Pennsylvania right here peels away. The colonel of the unit shot and killed, Colonel Dennis O'Kane, and he's probably killed within a few feet of where the colonel of the 14th Virginia falls. We know from an account later on that this colonel of the 14th Virginia, where he falls, that's James G. Hodges. Hodges goes down right in front of where the 69th is, and Henry Hunt, who's a friend of Hodges, actually turns up that body. He talks about that. They're probably killed, maybe 10 feet from each other. One Union, one Confederate. When you think about how close that action is, pretty close.
I just want to say this too before I forget about it later. I'm so glad we are talking about Union casualties here, because too often with tours and books and programs or that, we tend to make it sound like the bullets are only flying towards the Confederates and that all the casualties are Confederate only. Too often we forget the Union casualties in this charge, and that's a disservice to the guys defending the position here, and in many cases, the guys who gave their lives for it. So I'm glad we're doing this.
Sometimes the fighting here up in the copse of trees, and not always, but sometimes is hand to hand.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the cases where it is standing right here where we're standing. We mentioned on the other side, or south side of the copse of trees, the 19th Massachusetts and the 42nd New York came up into the position. They went through the copse of trees. The 19th Mass has 5 medals of honor that are handed out, 5 awardees here. Second only to the 6th Pennsylvania Reserves for units here in the Battle of Gettysburg. So 5 medals of honor issued to the 19th Mass for action here at Gettysburg. And you've got several of these for capture of flags. Major Edmund Rice leads this group up into the copse of trees. He's wounded inside where the copse of trees are.
Yeah.
He's hitting the leg. Meanwhile, the 19th Massachusetts comes out of the tree line somewhere right here on the south side of the tree line, near where you and I are standing, Jim. And it's a great story. It's worth telling. But the 14th Virginia Color Bearer, they overrun part of the left of the 69th Pennsylvania, and they get the color bearer of the 14th Virginia. We don't know his name, but he gets right up here near where we're standing and coming right out of the copse of trees, carrying the Massachusetts state colors, is a color bearer named Joseph DeCastro. And DeCastro comes face to face with the color bearer of the 14th Virginia Volunteer Infantry Regiment. And the shock that those two men must have had at that moment when they're right together. And boy, DeCastro doesn't hesitate. He takes the staff of the 19th Massachusetts color, state color, which is a beautiful white color, and he strikes the color bearer of the 14th Virginia, drives him down to the ground, and then pulls the flag right out of his hand. And for that act, Joseph DeCastro received the Congressional Medal of Honor. And what's interesting is that his father was Hispanic. He is the first Hispanic American to be awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor in the history of the Medal of Honor, which was actually established at the time of the Civil War. And that probably was right here where we're standing.
And as close as you and I are standing to each
I mean,
other.
these guys, this is a hand-to-hand action. That's right here. Now, meanwhile, behind us, of course, Louis Armstead is going to cross with the Confederate troops with his brigade, and he's going to get up into this artillery piece that's over here, which we've got some cones around. When the day we picked the video, they decided to put cones around Cushing's
Maintenance
Battery.
never ends at Gettysburg National Military Park.
And so you've got to do maintenance on the monuments. We just wish it would have been a time when we didn't have to shoot the video, but they're doing maintenance around here on all the monuments, and the monument crew is busy all the time. These guys, they're hats off and kudos to the Gettysburg National Military Park monument crew, because these guys are cleaning. They've got thousands of monuments, 1,300 monuments, memorials, and tablets to take care of, and they're out here all the time working on cleaning and taking care of the memorials that are here. So our hats go off to them.
Thankless task.
It is.
Task.
And if you see them around, you can thank them for what they do. Make sure you do that, because without these folks, we don't have a pristine monuments. These monuments are historic items themselves, haven't been put here a lot by the veterans. So it looks like they're doing some work around where Cushing is. We're going to go up to where Cushing is located. We'll talk a little bit about Armstead, and that'll be our next stop. All right, Jim, we're up here at Cushing's Battery. It does look like the reseating around here from our perk maintenance crew. Good job, guys, working on this stuff. And the monument to where Louis Armstead fell right over here behind me. So the Union Defense, let's talk about it. We've got the Philadelphia Brigade. We've got a couple companies of the 106th Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Only a couple, because some of them are over at East Cemetery Hill. We've got 72nd Pennsylvania. We've got 69th Pennsylvania. And we've got 71st Pennsylvania. They're all three of them right over here behind where I'm standing.
And only a couple companies of the 71st at the wall. People will debate over how many, but point being, not the whole regiment.
Not the whole regiment.
The rest of them are back there.
Webb is with the 72nd Pennsylvania to the right of your screen, right off of where this is. And these guys are firing into this line here for July 3rd. And Webb wants to get the 72nd to move. He goes up to the color bearer. He tries to get the color bearer to move, grabs a hold of him. The color bearer doesn't recognize who he is because he's only been in command.
Right.
And this color bearer apparently is pierced by many bullets.
Right.
And that, once again, to your point, the Confederates are shooting when they're coming over here. It's not like there's anybody shooting. that's here. Cushing is up on the stone wall, or had been at this time, with, we think, 2 guns, right, of the Battery A, 4th United States Artillery Regiment. He's wounded badly here
Several times.
in the battle. And then the 72nd will charge down right over the fields of where we're from.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think because of the court case and the publicity, I think the 72nd gets a bad rap among a lot of Civil War enthusiasts. I often hear people say, oh, the 72nd didn't charge down to the wall. No, they did. It was just later on, and not when Webb initially ordered them to. But it doesn't mean they didn't go to the wall. And in fact, their casualties were as high or higher than any unit in Webb's brigade.
Yeah, Webb tries to get them to go forward. The color bearer is shot down. Webb basically gives up
And goes over
and walks over here behind where we're at. Then he's shot. He's wounded here in the battle. But the 72nd does come down to try to shore up where the right flank of the 69th came through. Meanwhile, the Confederates are pulling over the wall. We just said the color bearer, the 14th Virginia, coming over the wall. Several Confederate battle flags coming right over the wall here, with Lewis Armstead in the 53rd Virginia, i.e. go back to Pickett's Charge Volume 1 to see that. They get right up here when Armstead is hit in the arm and leg and actually goes down. Cushing, bullet going through his open mouth, killed right up here in front of it, over here behind us, and later gets the Medal of Honor, along with the first sergeant, Frederick Fugger, who also gets the Medal of Honor and later becomes a commissioned officer here in the battle again.
And it's probably some people know Cushing's Medal of Honor wasn't awarded until 2014. And again, at the time, because he was deceased, he was not eligible, but a woman in his hometown lobbied for it, and eventually they sort of made a special exception for him and awarded it in 2014. But as of now, the last Medal of Honor recipient for Gettysburg.
For Gettysburg. What was interesting is apparently this precedent of awarding these medals for Civil War, apparently the president just awarded, while we're shooting this video, which is 2024, just awarded another medal to one of the raiders for Andrews Raiders that stole the train down in Georgia, Kennesaw Mountain, later on, or earlier, I forget the date of that. But anyway, the president now awarding something again for a Civil War long gone.
They give and they take away.
Posthumous award for the Medal of Honor that's here. So this is sealed off, Jim, right? I mean, in the attack here for July 3rd. This is, and it's going to be heavy fighting all around where we're standing.
And I think the point being, again, it's a unified defense in terms of Harrow and Hall and Webb's brigade, and everybody just coming in here. And Armstead gets over the wall with 200 guys, maybe. A couple hundred guys are not going to overpower all of John Gibbon's division, as heroic as that attempt might have been. And it's, again, guys over here, guys over there, guys at the wall. Just too much for the Confederates to withstand.
Now, we know this collapses right around 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
We're covering this in different sections. We can't cover it truly chronological as we walk across here, because that's not the way the battle unfolded. We're now going to leave here. We'll pick up on the corner of the outer angle, what we call the outer angle, for the northern portion of this. And these would be the elements of Pettigrew's division, Trimble's division getting up to the road, attacking north of where we're at, heading up to the Bryan Bar.
Alexander Hayes' division on the Union side. Keeping up with
so we're going from Gibbon into Hayes.
Yep, Gibbon to Hayes.
We just came up a little bit north. Behind us is the line for Alexander Hayes. This monument here is the monument to the 14th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry Regiment for July 3rd. We just came from the angle, and now we're at the approach where Pettigrew's men are, which are right off to the left of your screen. And Jim, the 14th has got an interesting story on a couple fronts. Why don't you tell us one?
A couple stories. So again, we're basically along what sometimes is referred to as the inner angle or the upper angle, which would primarily be defended by Smith's brigade of General Hayes' division.
Oh yes, I kept saying outer angle, didn't I? I'm saying the wrong. It's right. We're up by Hickok Avenue. I'm sorry.
I've never seen consistent use on it, so whatever. I just wanted to kind of point out where we were standing on that. Now, time does not, unfortunately, permit us to do all the stories here that maybe we wanted to do, but we're going to do at least the 14th Connecticut. 14th Connecticut, small regiment. I think they have less than 200 guys here on July 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. Here again, you can see the stone wall standing behind Wayne and myself. I'm going to tell a quick story about Sergeant Major William Hanks. As the Confederate advance, Pettigrew's guys were approaching us across that open field behind Wayne. Pettigrew's guys reached across the Emmitsburg Road when finally, for the most part, they had to go to ground in this field immediately on the other side of the stone wall. In some cases, maybe only 50 to 100 yards or so from where we're standing, which is, pretty close range when you're under fire. Well, anyways, one of the Confederate regiments planted their flag in the field in front of the 14th Connecticut's position. Major Theodore Ellis, temporarily commanding the regiment, basically called for volunteers to get that flag. Sergeant Major William Hanks basically leapt over the wall, grabbed the Confederate flag, gave a righteous wave of his sword, and according to his Medal of Honor citation, also let out a yell to try to inspire the guys. Hanks grabbed the flag, came back here over the wall, and as we implied at the beginning of this, would receive a Medal of Honor for his actions. So such moments like that, too, also greatly inspired many of the Yankees on this part of the field, who, quite frankly, by the afternoon of July 3rd, were probably getting a little tired of having their butts handed to them by the Army of Northern Virginia. So it was inspiring moments like that that fired these guys up. Now, Wayne, I think you have a different story you want to tell.
I like, of course, we've got multiple stories we could tell, but one of the things I think few people think about here in the battle are the number of people that fight at Gettysburg from different foreign countries. Now, we just talked about Max Thoman down in the 59th New York, who was really a native of Germany. There is a man that is part of Company F of the 14th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry Regiment here in the Battle of Gettysburg, and his name is Joseph Pierce. And Pierce was born in Canton, China. He was born in about 1843. He apparently is sold, from what we understand, to a sea captain named Peck, travels the seas, settles in Connecticut. And when the Civil War breaks out, Pierce joins Company F of the 14th Connecticut, fights in the Battle of Gettysburg as a Chinese soldier in the Civil War. He's not born to American missionaries. He is born of two Chinese parents, and he fights here in the Battle of Gettysburg. He dies in Connecticut, and I've got his date of death, January 3rd, 1916, and he's buried in Meridian, New Haven County, Connecticut, when he died. So a Civil War soldier from China during the time of the Battle of Gettysburg, fighting right here with the 14th Connecticut in the defense of Pickett's charge. And that's another series I see coming. Countries in the Battle of Gettysburg.
There you go.
Something we could do.
Endless possibilities.
We got endless possibilities.
But you're not going to walk to China on Walking Wednesday, are you?
No, that's a little too far. I think. But we certainly can bring those connections, right? And we've got a new series we just released last night, Gettysburg on the Road.
I know we saw it.
Called Gettysburg on the Road, so that ought to be good too. We can put in some things. But we're going to go down a little further now, and we're going to pick up down by the right end of the attack for the Union defense on July 3rd, which is Alexander Hayes, near the Bryan Farm and House.
Okay, we have moved a little bit further north down the avenue. Right behind us is the Abraham Bryan Farm, which probably many of you recognize. Abby, then, if you can pan out towards the Emmitsburg Road, Steinway Avenue area, there's a lot of traffic out there this morning. But where the blue truck is, right at the intersection, if you can get a shot of the 8th Ohio Regimental Monument, which we saw in part 1 of our series, we recorded many...
Part two.
I thought we did in part 2. Yeah, we did part 2. I'm sorry. All the videos are running together at this point, right? Which we did in part 2 of our series many moons ago. Yeah. Now, the 8th Ohio, of course, is most famous for basically coming out here on the Union right flank on the afternoon of July 3rd and basically enveloping and enfilading the left flank of the Confederate line, Pettigrew and Trimble's men in particular. Most people today think the 8th Ohio Monument is probably in the wrong position for where they were on July 3rd. Probably where they pivoted out and fired into the Confederate lines was probably about more where the KFC and the former General Pickett's battle theater was here directly in front of us, kind of at my 10 o'clock right now. But the 8th Ohio, led by Franklin Sawyer, we should point out, too, there were other elements of Union regiments in this action, parts of the 125th, the 126th, the Massachusetts Sharpshooters, Woodruff's Battery, McRae's section, and that sort of thing. So it wasn't just the 8th Ohio, but of course what they did then is they would have pivoted out like this, and they would have fired into the left flank of Pettigrew and Trimble's men as they were getting across the Emmitsburg Road. So we've got Stannard hitting one end of the line, the 8th Ohio hitting the other end of the line. And again, if you want to see more of it, up close, down low, go see part 2 of our series where we also talked about that. Wayne, I think you had some stuff you wanted to mention.
I just want to say, when we did video 2, right over here behind us where this white fence is, that would have been roughly the left of the 11th Mississippi. The 11th Mississippi went behind the Bryan barn. Abraham Bryan, a free African-American who fled during the time of the battle. His farm is the one that's being used. He'll later sell it, move into town, very prominent citizen here in the community, and is buried in the Lincoln Cemetery, which is the African-American cemetery here in Gettysburg. But the 11th Mississippi surrenders right behind where that barn is. The Union defense right along it, Alexander Hayes' division. And we're not covering every one of these regiments. We could have come out here and covered an hour on every one of these regiments coming up here that we went by. The 12th New Jersey, all of these, the 111th New York, 126th, 125th.
Maybe we should do that later, 1 hour Wednesdays.
Yeah, we could, we certainly, there's enough material to do that, but for the sake of brevity here, for this entire video, doing the overview of the defense here, we're looking and covering this in pretty wide swaths.
Wish we could have done more.
When the Confederates came up and crossed the Emmitsburg Road and came into this open field, part of the Union defense here on the right went over along where this white fence is, and that would have been 2 guns of Battery I, 1st United States Artillery Regiment, which is the battery under George Woodruff. Woodruff is killed here, mortally wounded here in the Battle of Gettysburg. He dies at the Granite Schoolhouse Farm, which was at that time part of the George Spanger Farm, which was owned by the Gettysburg Foundation. The other part of the Granite Schoolhouse, which doesn't stand any longer on National Park Service property, but Woodruff, mortally wounded here, dies here. 2 of his guns under a lieutenant named Tully McCrae. McCrae retires as a brigadier general many, many years after the battle. He's a West Point graduate, and he said of all the units he ever served in, all the ones he ever served in, he remembered the names of all the sergeants of this battery. The discipline and the esprit de corps in this unit was tremendous. And Tully McCrae puts 2 guns right along here, firing right into the left of where the Confederate line is. This would be the left of Pettigrew's assault. It would also be the left of Trimble's men up along the Emmitsburg Road. You've got part of the 125th New York. You've got part of the 126th. You've got sharpshooters from the 1st Mass. And Jim, you've got the 8th Ohio. So let's talk a little bit about, you moved that swing up. How far do you already said earlier in the video.
So it's a good question. How far do I think they go? So, I mean, I personally, I pointed out the former General Pickett's buffet. I think generally they were kind of starting in that position. I think they were possibly, though, as far forward, because they talk about being several hundred yards forward from where the monument is. So I think they could have ultimately have moved as far in that direction, where you see those modern houses over there. And then I think possibly pivoted in this direction to about where the side street of modern-day Long Lane is. So kind of on a line with the white fence that you're talking about, just on the other side of the Emmitsburg Road.
The Union defenders here are going to take many battle flags. They're going to capture many prisoners here. There's a great story about Alexander Hayes here, Jim. You want to talk about it?
Yeah.
I think it's just a great story. Alexander Hayes, a Western Pennsylvania native, the division commander here, friend of Grant's.
Yeah, big, fiery, hard-drinking, hard-fighting redhead. Another one of these units, though, that only recently had been attached to the Army of the Potomac. Yeah. We think of these guys having these long-standing associations, and we often don't realize many of them moved into position literally right on the eve of the Battle of Gettysburg. So anyways, Hayes has got this other division in the 2nd Corps. One newspaper reporter was so impressed by Alexander Hayes, the guy said, "He is the most impressive sight I have ever seen in my life," and I include Niagara Falls in that description. You're more impressive than Niagara Falls. How cool could that be? Well, maybe a little hyperbole there. But if he wasn't, he should have been.
Right.
So you get the idea. Hayes is kind of a larger-than-life guy. They are bringing captured battle flags. His division might capture about as many as 15 at one point, are supposedly credited to him. General Webb supposedly comes over at one point and says, hey, some of those battle flags should belong to me. And Hayes reportedly says to Webb, oh, we have so many, I guess you can give Webb a couple of them, kind of thing. So anyhow, though, the story that Wayne is alluding to, they give Webb and his staff officers at least one captured Confederate flag. Sometimes I see the story as singular or plural in terms of the flags. The important point is General Hayes grabs one of those Confederate flags, gets up on one of his horses, and basically rides up and down the line, dragging the Confederate flag in the dust. Much to the cheers of his men, and frankly, there are some Confederate accounts that at least talk about we could hear them cheering this over on the other side of the field. Goes back to what I said before, Wayne. This is a great opportunity for the Army of the Potomac for once to feel good about themselves in the repulse of the charge, and I think a natural leader like Hayes realizes that and takes full advantage of the opportunity.
Hayes will not live to see the end of the war. As we mentioned earlier, it's a classmate of U.S. Grant's. They served in the Mexican War together. They were close friends. And unfortunately, Hayes is killed in the wilderness. And reportedly, Grant wept when he heard that, that Hayes had been killed. That this is a man that ordered many men to die in the Civil War. And you think about what's going through his mind. But this was a close friend of his. Alexander Hayes is buried in Allegheny Cemetery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Well known for that. Union victory here. And like George Pickett said, the Yankees had something to do with it.
They sure did.
Just covered from the stops at the Nerve Center at Meade's headquarters over to McGilvery's artillery line to where up near where the Vermonters were and that entire line in between. We've covered every stop in this Union defense video here for July 3rd, 1863. At the end of the day, the Confederates are going to take tremendous losses. We covered that in video 1. They probably had 12,500, 6,000 to 8,000 casualties, depending on whether we're counting the walk and wounded. Union defense over here is hard to pin down. I noticed Edwin Coddington in his book mentions that he thought Meade had some 13,000 men available here. Available's the term. Between Hayes and Gibbon, you've got 6,000 men, because you got to take out some that have to do with the fighting on day 2. We know some of these New Yorkers are involved with Willard down on the second day. So between those two, and then you've got the Vermonters down at the other end, which are near 2,000 men. So you might have 8,000 there, plus whatever the additional troops are from some of the Third Corps units. But do they get in the fight or not? Probably not. They're probably coming up there. But the Union Army, they were definitely outnumbered here. I don't think there's any question of that in the Union defense here.
You know, was it the 3-to-1 odds, which of course could be critical too. But, you know, in terms of casualties, I mean, we tried to estimate in our book. We thought maybe, and it was a mathematical exercise because nobody knows, maybe 1,900 casualties between Hayes and Gibbon's divisions combined. And it goes back to what we said before, folks. Yes, bullets and artillery projectiles are flying in this direction.
And it's hard to pin down what some of these units that had been involved on day 1 and 2 lost on day 3 because they're not reporting these individually. The Union casualties here for the defense of July 3rd of Cemetery Ridge, not insignificant. Let's just point that out. So we spend a lot of time talking about Confederate casualties. We got to look at this Union defense over here. And in my view, the Union Army fought a terrific defense here, and Meade was able to use these interior lines, the artillery plan and execution by Hunt, the bringing up of the artillery from the artillery reserve and replacing batteries that had been pretty much annihilated, and in the use of infantry to bring them up here and shore up this attack. Great advantages in the Union planning and Union execution versus the Confederate execution.
The flanking moves on both sides, so critical. Right.
Well, you got anything else you want to add to close this off, Jim?
Well, no, but I do want to, again, thank you guys for having me. There may be a part 4 if the public demands it. Maybe they can ask for it in either the YouTube comments or send your cards and letters.
And Wayne Motts at the Gettysburg Foundation, end of the video. Jim, once again, thank you so much. You have volunteered to come out here at your own time.
Well, I have.
On 3 of these videos, and we just love having you. I love working with you. And I just really appreciate it. You've been a good friend. And what an excellent historian, great commentary. And we've really had a good time going through all this, and I appreciate it.
In all types of weather. We've literally covered every season of the sun recording these.
We sure have. For those of you, please support the Gettysburg Foundation, the work we do to help the Gettysburg National Military Park. The Gettysburg National Military Park, we want to give a shout out to the interpretation crew, all the maintenance crew, all the crews, because the park has employees working flat out to make this 6,000 acres a better place for you and I to not only tour, but as remembrance for the men who fought and died here on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So we appreciate what the park does, and help the Gettysburg Foundation. If you're not a member, join. You can do it at the Friends Desk. You can join it online. Be sure to push that little button down at the bottom of the screen. Follow us on all the social media channels, not just on YouTube, and stick with us on this because we've got a lot more exciting video content coming your way. And we thank you so much for hanging with us on the Union defense of Cemetery Ridge. Pickett's charge, Union defense, July 3rd, 1863.